Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday will head to the White House after a defiant speech in front of the United Nations General Assembly. One item will be on the agenda, and that will be, or one item that will be on the agenda, rather, will be the Trump administration's proposed 21-point Gaza peace plan. Sources telling CNN that plan calls for all hostages to be released within 48 hours of a deal and lays out a roadmap for Gaza after the war. I want to bring in CNN political and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid. He's also a correspondent for Axios. Barak, thank you so much for being here. I know you have had a busy week. You were at the UN yesterday for the Prime Minister's speech. What was your sense of how his message was received and where things stand now?
Hi, Jessica. I think the most interesting thing in Netanyahu's speech was the fact that he did not refer at all to President Trump's plan for ending the war in Gaza. He did not say a word, not against it, not for it. He completely ignored it when I think a lot of people wanted to hear if he's going to lay out any response to the plan or he will talk about it in any way, but he decided to ignore it. I think the speech itself was mostly for domestic consumption. I don't think Netanyahu wanted to really convince anybody from those who were in the room. Most of the delegates left the room at the beginning in protest. And I think the speech as a whole wasn't that significant. It is far less significant than the negotiations that are taking place right now about the deal for ending the war.
And so you note that he didn't speak of this peace plan one way or the other. What are you hearing about the thinking around this proposed peace plan, both from the Israelis, whether the Hamas negotiators would be open to this, and kind of where the U.S. is in all of this?
So obviously, I think President Trump and his team want to end the war. This is very clear. They have very little patience left for delays on this plan. I think they think that this 21-point plan creates a basis for ending the war. I think they managed to mobilize a lot of support in the Arab world, in the international community. It's a big but, Netanyahu is going to come to the White House on Monday. And in many meetings, previous meetings and previous phone calls Netanyahu had with Trump came into the meeting or started the phone call wanting to or stressing a certain position and left the meeting or the phone call stressing another position which was much closer to that of Netanyahu. So I think the question is whether President Trump is going to really put his foot down and say, Mr. Netanyahu, that's it. You need to end the war, and now is not the time for arguments. Or Netanyahu will come in, lay out his position to President Trump, and President Trump will come out of the meeting and say, you know what, I agree with Mr. Netanyahu. That's the one big question mark. Everything else, I think the details of the plan are, I'm not saying they're not important, but the most important thing is how firm is Trump going to be with Netanyahu in that meeting?
And I think you're right. And that seems to be the thing that's going to dictate where this goes from here is what does Prime Minister Netanyahu think he can get? And does he think he can push Trump and convince him to be more in alignment with him? Or does the president, can he hold on to what he actually wants to achieve? What do you know about kind of as Netanyahu prepares for this? What is the Israeli thinking, the Israeli government thinking, or the prime minister's team's thinking around going into this meeting?
Well, I think it's basically Netanyahu himself. I don't think people around him have a lot of influence on his thinking. A lot of it is about domestic politics, whether he thinks that going for that deal right now will serve his political interest. In many ways, Netanyahu's dilemma, and I heard it from both Israeli officials and US officials, his dilemma now is he's in this fork in the road. And he needs to choose whether he wants to go with Donald Trump or he wants to go with his ultra-nationalist coalition partners, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Those are very different choices. In the past, when Joe Biden was the president, Netanyahu chose many times to go with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and not with the president of the United States. Now the question is whether Netanyahu will pick Trump this time. I think that if Netanyahu goes to that meeting on Monday and it ends without a deal and without him convincing Trump to back him, this could be a very, very serious crisis between Israel and the United States.
That's it's very interesting to think of it that way. And to your point about where this fork in the road that Netanyahu where he is, Trump says he spoke to the prime minister Friday, and in Trump's words, he said that he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank, which, of course, the far-right members of his government very much are in support of. That seems like a key issue that really underscores and highlights exactly the fork in the road that you're talking about.
Yes, definitely. And I think that when there were a lot of people, including Netanyahu himself, including his confidant Ron Dermer, that said, oh, it's not going to be a problem. We'll convince Trump to give us a green light for some kind of annexation in the West Bank. Maybe not the whole West Bank, maybe just small parts. We'll also convince the UAE to be okay with it. We will manage to do something. And I think that in the last week, it became clear, both the Arab world, especially the United Arab Emirates, that made it clear that annexation, any kind of annexation, is a red line. And President Trump went out publicly and said, I will not allow it. I think that took this thing off the table. For Netanyahu to do this now, it would be a direct confrontation with President Trump. And I really don't think that Netanyahu will go down that road. I don't see that. But when it comes to Trump, I think we have a historic record already. And we saw that Trump wanted to end the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. And he was willing to confront Netanyahu on this thing. And he forced him to turn back the Israeli jets who were on their way for another strike in Tehran. And he forced him into this ceasefire. And it was a huge success for President Trump. And he saw how that he has leverage over Netanyahu, that he can force him into ceasefires. And I think that the question is whether Trump is going to be the Donald Trump of the 12-day war that forces a ceasefire on Netanyahu, or the Donald Trump of the last 8 months that has more or less backed Netanyahu on anything he wanted to do in Gaza.
It will be quite interesting to see. Barak Ravid, always good to have you. Thank you so much.